All right, and we are rolling. What is going on, guys? For those of you that don't know, my name is Caleb, and welcome to the first video on my channel, the Malaga Drive Hoops YouTube channel. I appreciate you for being here. Whether you saw it on, I really don't care how you're here. I appreciate you, and I'm excited for this. But for those of you that don't know, before we jump into the actual video itself, I wanted to, as this is our first video, I wanted to obviously explain what the direction of the channel is, what I intend to do, and why I am doing it. And so I've always loved basketball. I know a lot of you watching this, probably, you know that. I love basketball, and I love betting. And just because you know the NBA doesn't mean that you can bet it successfully. They're two separate things. Got my trusty notebook. And so I just have a huge passion for both, and so this is, for me, combining the two, and what you can expect is, and barring unforeseen circumstances, crossing my fingers, every game day in Orlando, every slate, I am going to preview every single game on that slate from a betting perspective, and you're probably thinking, Caleb, you're not going to bet on every game, right? And yes, I'm not going to bet on every game, but the NBA is just something that I've watched so much. It's so effortless for me to watch it. And so I want to, even in the games where I'm not necessarily having a play, I want to present all the information that you could ever need to make an informed bet on that game to you in an easy to understand way. So even if I'm not betting on it, you know what is going on. You're not missing anything. A lot of times, and this started, right, I'd start watching soccer previews, betting previews back in the day, because soccer was one of those sports that I personally had a lot of interest in and enjoyed, but I just didn't know enough to bet it successfully. And then I started to take that to watching NBA previews when I was bored, just to, see if I can get another edge, see if there's something I'm missing there. And a lot of times, there's obviously some good guys, and a lot of guys that know their stuff, but a lot of times I'm watching these and I'm like, man, this is pretty shallow. Like, I knew everything you said, and it didn't really take a genius to know a lot of what you said. Like you said, they need to. Anyways, so what I'm going to do, again, concise, give you all the information you need to know, and outside of that, I'll continue to grow and try and, create videos also that focus on just the basketball court in terms of schemes and what's going on, and things I think are cool. But for now, you can expect a video on every site. So first game day is Thursday. I'm very excited. Again, a lot going on in the world, which kind of tampers it. We're in the middle of an epidemic. We're in the middle of trying to find a way for everyone to be treated equally. And so at times I think, I feel kind of bad getting this excited about basketball. But at the end of the day, I love this. And I think this is also going to be hopefully a good platform for the players to continue to make progress in, obviously not COVID, but social justice. So with that being said, I want to finally get into the video itself today. And today we are going to be going through my favorite pre-restart bets. This again is Thursday. I wanted to wait till as late as possible because we get news every day. I wouldn't be shocked if Tuesday or Wednesday something pops up that changes a topic within this video. But I wanted to wait as late as possible because of that, and I feel like now's a good time. Hopefully get this up Monday or Tuesday, and then obviously the game first slate is Thursday. We'll have a video covering that site either Tuesday or Wednesday, and then I'm thinking about adding a little DraftKings to it at the end, but we'll see. Anyways, first bet that I'm eyeing, and actually, sorry, before we do that, I wanted to touch on a couple things, just general thoughts from the betting side in Orlando. And the first is, I just think that this year, more than ever, is the year to bet dogs. Like, the betting, whoever the gods are that control this, whether it be the betting gods or the NBA gods or the NBA betting gods, probably the NBA betting gods, they could not have drawn up a more perfect year for dogs, right? You're first off, there's just no home court advantage. So Now there's no difference if you're the 7th seed or the 2nd seed in terms of just where you're playing. That's huge. Not only are you for the team like a 6 seed or a 5 seed, a team like the Sixers, that is huge. Although they had their immense struggles on the road, and technically they're all on the road. But I don't think I need to dive too deep into that. It's just there's no road games, right? So automatically you're going to have a better shot. And I feel like the odds are still somewhat, at least that we're getting on a lot of these underdogs that I personally think have a shot, are not that much different than if we had just been in a regular season. So I'm not really sure what I'm missing there, but that's huge. It's a more intimate setting. It feels like I'm back in Vegas or Reno for an AAU tournament in high school. And I think for the players, it's an adjustment. I was listening to JJ Redick's podcast. I mean, it has to be. You go from playing in an arena, whether that be home or away, filled with fans, so much noise, so much going on, to now it's just straight basketball. And I'm sure they'll pump crowd noise in there and all that good stuff. But it's just basketball. It's an intimate feel to the game of basketball. And I just feel like a setting like this, if a team gets hot, this setting is more conducive to them just continuing it and going. You see that in March Madness, but you don't really see that in the NBA playoffs because you got to go play 4 road games, but that's out now. So if your team is hot, you're just in a neutral court and you can just ride that wave. Hopefully you hit it at the right moment and then boom. So are the Lakers, Bucks, and Clippers the 3 best teams and in a tier of their own? Yes. But are there a lot of factors that are going to make it tougher for those 3 teams than it would any other year? Yes. And lastly, along that topic, it's just COVID. Pretty obvious. I watched a video I went on mybookie.com 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and James Harden was minus 300 to test positive for Corona. Minus 300? LeBron James was minus 175. Those odds, for one, scared me. I still don't really know what's going on. I'm obviously not going to bet on that. But it's just, all it takes is, it doesn't even need to be a Giannis or a LeBron or a Kawhi Leonard. If Patrick Beverly, if Brooke Lopez, there's plenty of that. I could list 40 to 50 players where if they're hurt, it significantly makes it tougher for that team. And so, it's just, as well as, I don't like these, as well as the NBA has, it seems like, I'm going to start it over. As well as it seems the NBA has done with keeping the bubble clean and doing a good job, I just wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a positive test from a player eventually, and I hope not. But the reality of the situation is, it's a possibility. So I just think this year is really, if there were ever a year to hit underdogs, man, this is the year. All right, so the first bet that I have already locked in is Portland Trail Blazers under 3.5 wins in the bubble, minus 105. And I know. I think I'm in the minority on this one. I'm sorry, Tyler. I'm sorry, Sarge. And you're probably thinking, like, what? Like, this team was in the Western Conference Finals last year. They're getting Zach Collins back. They're getting Yusuf Nurkic back. And Dame's got a lot of rest. Like, you're crazy. And I get that. And I've actually, as I've watched them recently, I'm starting to get a little nervous. But let me read to you their schedule. Okay, so they start off with the Memphis Grizzlies. Winnable game. They're a 2-point favorite. Then they have the Boston Celtics, the Houston Rockets, the Denver Nuggets, the LA Clippers, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Brooklyn Nets. Now, outside of the Brooklyn Nets, that's a pretty damn tough schedule. The schedule makers didn't do any favors for them, and obviously that part of it was reflective of their schedule had there not been a restart. But 6 out of the 8 games are against really tough teams, and again, we might see some of these teams rest guys in certain spots, but I think time is of the essence, man. You've been out for 4 months. You've got 8 games. I think you've got to you've got to try and take advantage of these games, and I think a lot of guys are. That doesn't mean you're going to play him 38 minutes, but you're going to play him. And so I get it. Dame's healthy, and I love Dame, but I mean, Dame's had his best offensive season, and it hasn't mattered. The Blazers are 5, 6, maybe 4 games under 500. So, I mean, Dame can't do much more than he already has. I mean, he's having a phenomenal season, but the Blazers just don't defend the basketball. They don't defend. They don't defend anything. They don't defend the basketball. They don't defend the rim. They don't defend the players. And a lot of that had to do with Melo. I don't think him losing weight. I feel like he loses weight every year. I don't feel like him losing weight is really going to change much. And defense is the most important thing. I mean, getting buckets is the most important thing, but defense is the direct way to stop getting buckets. So you just look at a team that's been horrible all year on the defensive end, 27th in defense behind really bad teams. Like, no playoff team is really anyone near him. There are some bubble teams near him because the Wizards got invited and the Suns. But I don't see it. They lost their they lost their best perimeter defender in Trevor Ariza. I love Yusuf Nurkic, and he looks really good, and so does Collins. Denver shipped a talent like Nurkic out to Portland when they got Jokic because they didn't feel like Nurk could play the 4 next to Jokic. And Nurk has gotten better and has added more range. But the fit-wise, it's going to be tough to maximize the most out of Nurk and Hassan while playing them on the floor at the same time because they have very similar skill sets. Nurk is a little bit better shooter, probably a little bit more mobile, but I don't know if he's mobile enough and consistent enough to play the 4. And we'll see. He's looked really good, which is making me a little nervous about this. But end of the day, I mean, we have a body of work that we've seen, and you're adding Nurk and Collins, which are helpful for sure, and they're better players. But with that tough of a schedule, I think there's only so much more you can add on off. The offense is fine. Where you really have to add is that defense, and I don't know if Nurk playing the 4. Nurk is a better defender than Hassan, but I think they're going to want to play him together. At least that's what Stotts hinted at. And him at the 4, I don't know. I think there's a lot of 4s that can expose him in terms of quickness and mobility. And they don't have any plus defender on the floor besides Nurkic, who is coming back from injury. Ariza is out. CJ's not a good defender. Dame's not a good defender. Hazonia, I just don't see it. If the Blazers, the way this cashes, if Dame goes crazy, which he's already done, Dame goes crazy, or they run into some luck with the teams they're playing getting hurt or resting guys. And I get it. It's sketchy. I'm in the minority. And I've watched both those scrimmage games. First game was whatever, but last game they looked good. They're playing well, but that schedule's brutal and they can't defend. Okay, I wanted to touch on one more as we're in the same. Both these teams are in the same general area, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies and the Portland Trailblazers. So I wanted to touch on this bet as well. Haven't locked it in. But think it's worth looking at and at least worth talking about a little bit. And that's the Grizzlies to make the playoffs at -115. They have put themselves in a pretty good position standings-wise. They have a 3.5 game lead on the 9th seed. If there is 4 games or less, I believe, between the 8 and 9 seed at the end of the 8 games, then they'll play in a playoff in which the 9th team has to be the 8th team twice. And if the 8th team wins one, they're in. Grizzlies started off 6-16, went 26-16 since. Just a very solid team, and I think this team is firsthand proof. If you care about winning, if that's the number one thing on the majority of players on your team, it's going to do good things. Grizzlies aren't amazingly talented, but it all starts with Ja. He's very unselfish. The guys know if they give it up, there's a chance they get it back. If they're open, they're going to get it back. They just all try to make the right play. Dylan Brooks forcing it a little bit. But this team has been great at protecting the rim. JV and Jaren and Clark have done a great job. That is what they prioritize. They do give up a lot of threes, which you're seeing with a lot of the top defenses, giving up a lot of threes, but protecting the paint. And you've seen somewhat of a shift. But I mean, even 2 years ago, if you said, "Oh, you're leading the league in threes given up," which I believe the Bucks are, you're not a good defense. But that's just changed because if you can seal off the paint, those are the easiest baskets, man. Anyways, I'm getting a little distracted. But what I'm saying is the Grizzlies have, even if the Grizzlies go 3-5, and they do have a tough schedule, the Pelicans and Blazers would both have to go 7-1, which is just tough. I don't see that. I for sure don't see that with the Blazers. And Pelicans have a pretty cupcake schedule, but 6-1 is going to be tough. Even if the Grizzlies really fall up and go 2-6, still got to go 6-2. So what I'm trying to say is the Grizzlies will be there in that play-in game, and they've just got to win one of the two games. I think they'd have to be like plus 260, 250 for both of those games for the odds to add up for them just to win one of the 250s to be at minus 115. I don't know if that made sense. But what I'm trying to say is this is a team that has battled, and they have not looked great in the scrimmage. Taylor Jenkins, who's done a phenomenal job this year, played his guys late into played them though as if it was a regular game, which I don't blame him because essentially these 8 games even are playoff games. And they lost to the Rockets and got blown out by the Sixers early on. So they're not looking great. They don't have a ton of vets, so it's not surprising. It's a team that wants to win, that has their mind in the right spot. And I just think, they've worked their whole season to get here, and everyone's healthy besides Justice Winslow. You're telling me we just got to win one of two games. One of two games. I think they'd take that. I think they find a way to get one. I haven't locked it. I will let you know if I do. But I think that's something to monitor because it's a talented team. Again, 26-16 since their start. Like, that's a sustained amount of time. And it's obviously a much different situation. But I think the Grizzlies are worth looking at. I was looking at the Kings. They were plus 1,200 to make it. And I was for a certain amount of time looking at that, but I will be off of that. Bagley is out. Harrison Barnes still has COVID. Rashawn Holmes broke quarantine rules to go pick up food, and I'm sure he'll be ready to go for the start. But still, it can't help that you're missing 10 days of very, very, very valuable practice and game time. And then on top of that, De'Aaron sprained his ankle. I know he's back. I know this Kings team is a team that feels very slighted. I know a couple media outlets and a couple teams forgot they were even going to be there. They feel that, they hear that, they know that, but I just think the hill they're trying to climb is a little bit too tall. I still think there's hope for them next year. A lot of talent, and they probably win some games, but the Pelicans' schedule is just a lot easier. It's going to be tough, and I'm probably going to stay away. Okay. All right, next up, we are going to stay in the Western Conference, and I have two teams that I want to talk about. The first is the Houston Rockets, and I thought about this for a while. I haven't locked it. It's still something I'm monitoring, considering, but I think it's worth talking. The Rockets are plus 650 to win the West, and I believe around plus 1,200, 1,300 be champion. I don't like that price on champion. I think I consider it. I'd ideally want a little bit more, and I'd ideally want a little bit more on 650 to win the West. But I think the Rockets can do it. And this might seem a little out there, but just from watching these scrimmages, hearing the players talk, this is a much more intimate setting. It's a tournament style. I've talked about it earlier in the video. And I don't know if you guys played AAU or whatever, or just watching March Madness, like, when teams get hot, it has this sort of magical feeling. You're staying in the same place. You're not leaving. You're playing on the same court. It's all basketball. There's no distractions in there. It's just a different feel. You're not going home to your family, your friends, the club, unless you're Lou Williams, the club. You're in a bubble, a basketball bubble. And so I think that really helps a team like the Rockets, where halfway through the year they decided, you know what? forget normal basketball, forget traditional basketball. We don't need anyone taller than 6'7". And it looked really good at first. Obviously, they started great, beat the Lakers, and then they kind of regressed. And then they got hot again, and then towards the end of the year, they fell off a cliff. And their rebounding was bad. I just did a recent podcast. Shout out Tyler for this fact. But their rebounding since they dealt Capella, I think, would be, if you extrapolated it out for the whole year, would be the second or third worst we've ever seen, maybe even worse. But they know that. They understand that, and it's just, I'm not going to call it gimmicky, but it's a style we've never seen, and I think that style is more, how do I say this? I think this style is better suited for the bubble. I think you're going to see a lot of ISO. Again, it's just scrimmages, so it's hard to draw what's significant and what's not. But these scrimmages, I'm seeing a lot more plays break down and then just them going into ISO. And that's the Rockets' bread and butter. Real quick stat for you. This year, in minutes where Harden, Westbrook, Tucker, and Robert Covington shared the floor, they scored. They were a +9 per 100 possessions. And now you have a healthy Eric Gordon back. He watched him yesterday, looked a lot slimmer, looked healthy, looked quick, and that's an X factor. I know I talked about Robert Covington, but when Eric, this is a guy that scored 50 this year, and he's healthy, and the Rockets do need guys outside of Russ and Harden who can take the offensive load off. And yes, you have Covington, McLemore, guys who can shoot, but Gordon's a guy that can actually create his own shot as well as shoot. And so you get that lineup that was +9 per 100 possessions. Then you throw Gordon in there. I do want to say props to the Rockets for creating a system that really they're able to get the best out of Russ. I talked about it on the podcast. I was not down for the Russ Harden fit. You're taking the two biggest, highest volume shooters in the league and putting them together, and it worked out about as what you would have expected early on. And Russ's minutes without Harden were terrible, but they figured it out, cleared the lane, and I feel like a lot of basketball traditionalists wanted this to fail. I don't know if I was in that boat. Because I think it's basketball. Like if you're finding new ways to be innovative, and I know it's a stretch to call James Harden playing one-on-one basketball every possession innovative. But I think this team screams tournament. This team screams we could get hot. And I wanted to be careful because we've heard a lot. Russ had COVID, and then Harden, I've talked about, it was -300 to test positive for COVID. So I've laid off because I wanted to make sure they're, health-wise they were okay. But Harden and Russ look good health-wise. I watched them in the scrimmages. This team can get hot. They don't have the size, but I think another thing that helps them is they match up really well with the LA Lakers, who are probably going to be their biggest challenge. So you have what most people would say is the best team in the West they match up well with. Their team is very... we talked about it when it happened. We said if they hit 33s, or 25 threes, 23s, they're going to win. And it's a tournament. It's not. It is a tournament once the playoffs start, but it's just small courts, short lights, no crowd noise. We're just hooping. And I think this team, the style of this team, the personnel of this team, and again, you got to take into fact too, Harden and Russ are two of the guys that the media and a lot of fans have labeled as, just can't get it done. And now they're together. They both just have that chip on the shoulder. It looks like Harden lost weight. Going to be interesting to see how guys like Covington and Tucker battle the bigs in the West. But I do think in a year like this, looking at the Rockets as +650 to win the West, and then they suddenly make a run to the Western Conference Finals, you can hedge out on that other team, make some cash. Okay. All right, keeping it rolling. My favorite bet now, to this point, is the Los Angeles Clippers, and that's whether it be +180 to win the West or +300 to win the NBA championship. And that, I'm smiling because I have so many friends who are Laker fans, and I probably have 2 friends that are Clippers fans. So it's funny, I've been playing coy. I haven't really picked anyone. I've been doing the whole, all 3 are about the same. thing for a while. And I honestly do think all three of those teams are in the same tier. It is not going to surprise me at all if the Lakers or Bucks beat the Clippers. Can they do that? Yes. But there are a multitude of reasons as to why I like the Clippers headed into these playoffs. And I will touch on those. But first, I do think it's important to touch on their weaknesses and what people say are their weaknesses, because I think they have two really good responses to that right now. So, first weakness is obviously healthy. You know the deal with Kawhi. I don't need to get into that. But PG was not healthy at all, and that was a guy that was, when he was healthy, was a top 3 in the MVP voting last year. So you're getting the two guys that you shelled out big money for, that made you title favorites when you made these two trades, back at their healthiest versions of themselves, or at least much healthier than they were. Quick story, I was listening to JJ Redick's podcast. He is boys with Patrick Beverley, so you know Beverley was being candid on the podcast. He's obviously the type of guy where if you're not in his corner, he's not going to give you anything. But JJ is in his corner, and he said that he was grinding during quarantine, working hard. He hit up Kawhi, was like, hey, let's work out. And he said Kawhi gave him a whole new meaning of the meaning to working hard. He said that he had never seen anything like it, and that Kawhi is in great, great shape. So you're hearing it straight from the source. So the health, maybe you got a little bit of an issue with Lou Williams, but I think that should be sorted by the time the playoffs start. And I think in general, as we creep closer, at least I'd hope the focus level just continues to narrow. The other issue that people talk about with the Clippers is they say they don't have any rim protectors. Their center rotation, their big rotation is Ivica Zubac, Montrezl Harrell, and JaMychal Green. And fun fact for those of you that don't know, outside of the Jazz, the Clippers do the best job at protecting the paint. Other than they are, with the Lakers, the only team in the West that is top 5 in scoring and defense. And I think the main reason why I like the Clippers is they can play and beat you so many different ways. And in this league right now, versatility is so huge. And the Lakers play a certain style, and they're going to play that style. The Rockets obviously have a certain style of basketball that they like to play. The Nuggets do. The Bucks do. The Clippers can play all over. They can go small. They can go big. They can play half court. They can play in transition. I mean, they're 10th in pace, but they also slow it down and are good in isolation. They have so many 3 buckets in isolation. And then, you go back to the rim protecting. Ivica Zubac is an excellent rim protector and very, very underrated. Again, playoffs are a different beast, but outside of Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo, Ivica Zubac has the lowest field goal percentage given up at the rim. So now you're looking at a team that can play. Oh, we're playing the Rockets now? All right, we can play this way. Oh, we're playing the Lakers? Oh, we'll play this way. Oh, we got to slow it down for this series against the Thunder? We can do that. The last 8 games before the playoff, or before the shutdown, the Clippers were 7-1 and were destroying good teams on the road. The Rockets, the Thunder, the Celtics, on the road. So you saw them slowly starting to lock in, and Doc Rivers is a guy who understands what it takes to win a title, and their mindset is laser focused. They took care of their bodies during quarantine, and he said multiple times, this is a business trip, and Doc wants it. So the Clippers check every box, right? Great defense, great offense, rim protection, guards who can come out, or guards/wings that can come out and play defense on the perimeter, veterans, a coach who's won it. I might have already said that. And they're locked in. They're the healthiest they've ever been. And then you look at the Lakers who come into this. They add JR and Dion and lose Rondo and Bradley. And the Clippers get now the healthiest version of themselves. Add Marcus Morris, who I think is just another body to throw on Bron. I don't know. They check off every box. The mindset, the vets, the defense, the offense, the ISO score. I mean, they lost that last game to the Lakers, but Avery Bradley hit 6 threes. That was the one game they lost in the last 8 games. Avery Bradley hit 6 threes. I'm not going to call that a fluke, but that's not going to happen every game. It was clear the Clippers were coming into their own, and they were bummed that the season had to restart. Obviously, pandemic, like bigger things, but just in general, they were bummed because they were playing the best basketball of the season, and now they had 4 months to get their best two players healthy. And I just don't see. I mean, if I gotta pick one, it's the Clippers. The Lakers, I still think, I think the reason why the Clippers and Bucks, or the Lakers and Bucks are favored is because they were just better in the regular season. You've seen the best. I mean, you haven't seen the best from the Lakers and Bucks, but you've seen kind of their peak. I don't want to say that, but I mean that. You haven't seen the Clippers peak, and so that's why you're getting this price. And I think this is the best possible situation to see the Clippers peak, all aside from having 4 months off and not having played. I don't know. I think Zoo, Lou, and Shamet are still facing some health and quarantine and all that. So I don't know if they're ready for the regular season. But when the playoffs start, I just think it's going to be really hard to beat this Clippers team. I mean, they have an isolation score. They have great defenders on the wing. They have you think about it, they have the perfect guys for Braun. Like, is there anyone you would rather have to try and stop Braun than Kawhi and Paul George? I don't think so. And I get it. AD is tough. No one can really guard AD, but JaMychal's honestly done a good job in limited opportunities. And again, Zubac, third lowest field goal percentage at the rim. I love the Clippers at plus 300 to win it all. I love them at plus 180 to win the West. We haven't seen the best version of this Clippers team, and I think there's a good chance we do. I have hit both. I think very worst case, you're going to get a chance to hedge and make decent money on the Western Conference. And then, obviously we'll see with the title. But I think they check every box, and it's clear it's not just talent, and it's not just on-court product. It's up here. Doc has these guys right. Again, you can point to Lou and say he doesn't. But it's a family. It's also a business trip. They're the healthiest they've been. They can play every style of basketball that you could want them to play. They protect the rim. They hit three. I mean, I don't know. Okay. Now, moving over to the Eastern Conference, I've got two sneaky teams I like both to win the Eastern Conference and potentially title. I will say right off the bat, again, I do think the Bucks are very, very good. Again, they're in their own tier with the Clippers and Lakers. But with the odds that are being given on some of these teams because of this historic season that the Bucks have had, I think both these teams are worth hitting, even if the Bucks are the clear favorite. Let's start up in Canada with the Toronto Raptors, plus 600 to win the Eastern Conference, plus 1,600 to win the title. And this is a different team than that you would normally see. Like, a team like this really hasn't won the finals. Like, every team that's won the finals has had a legitimate go-to 1A score, at least off the top of my head. You could go back to the Spurs, but I'm counting, Tim Duncan's a at worst, top 15 player of all time. We don't need to get into that. But what I'm trying to say is the Raptors lack that traditional number one guy on offense. And I think a lot of NBA fans, both casual, and what's the opposite of casual? Serious NBA fans and casual NBA fans, I don't think many of them think the Raptors really have a shot because of that. And I get that, but what they lack there, they make up on defense. It's a team that was second in defense this year, behind obviously the historic Bucks. But it's not a traditional defense, and it varies night to night. I mean, Nick Nurse has put together some absolutely wacky game plans in the past, and he's going to continue to do it. You know, the Bucks, the Lakers, all these teams, they have their good defenses, but they're going to basically, in general, play the same defense. The Raptors could switch it up every night, and they have no weak link, which I think a lot of times goes unlooked, because even if you have 3-4 really good defenders, if you have a weak link, that's going to put some stress on your defense, and the Raptors just don't have any weak links. Everyone they put out there is at least average. I'd say the worst defender is Norman Powell, and Norman Powell was a good defender this year. So Super deep. And in terms of making up that lack of scoring option, Pascal's done a good enough job. Obviously, the field goal percentage has gone down a little bit as a result, as he's had to step up and take some of the load that Kawhi left. But him and Lowry, I still feel confident enough that they can score. It's going to come down to how they score in the half court. And yes, they don't have a great guy, but Pascal is good enough, I feel like, and Lowry's good enough, both to be second guys, that when you have Norman Powell, OG, Kyle Lowry, Van Vliet, Gasol, Ibaka, Siakam, it's just a TD stepped up. They have so many guys that I feel like on any given night, any one of those can go off and kind of provide. And still, on most nights, Lowry and Siakam are going to provide that load. Now, as I named all those guys, this is a team that is built, and they did it last year, and you're going to say, oh, they had Kawhi and Danny Green. Yes, they did, and that's going to hurt. But OG Anunoby has turned into the best, in my opinion, the best one-on-one defender out on the wing in isolation, outside of maybe Kawhi Leonard. He's so long, crazy wingspan. I think he has like a 7-foot wingspan, able to move his feet well, gets in passing lanes, provides secondary rim protection. And I was listening to a podcast with the Toronto Raptors beat writer, and they feel like, because you got to remember, OG wasn't there last year, right? And then they lose Kawhi, lose Danny Green, two of the best wing defenders in the game, and OG turns into that. So I was listening to that podcast, and it sounds like OG will take the primary responsibility of guarding Giannis. One, because Siakam can do it, but they tried that a couple times this year, and it just didn't go well. I think OG has a little bit more tools, and then on top of that, Siakam's going to be tasked with a much bigger offensive assignment. So give that to OG. But they also have a skinny Marcus Gasol who was playing really well and just had come back. Ibaka's had a great year. Ibaka has had a really, really great year. And Siakam. And so you have those four guys. And even Rondae, who can be, I have no idea what's going on. It's just elbows and angles and knees all over the place when he plays. But that's another guy that can take a turn on Giannis. And so you look at this Raptors team, they're well coached. They've been in Orlando. Maybe not Orlando, but they've been in Florida. They were there a really long time before a lot of other teams. It's just a team. It's a team, and I really think at this point in the NBA, winning is almost a skill. Being a winning player, making winning plays is a skill that goes unnoticed, and every single player on the Raptors has that. They have a great coaching staff that puts together great game plans. And so I just don't think you can count this team out. Plus 600 to win the Eastern Conference. They're gonna, in all likelihood, be the 2 seed, barring the Celtics going on a huge push in those 8 games, which means they avoid the Bucks till the end. I just think plus 600 and plus 16,000 is worth the shot, because once they get there, let's say they get to the Eastern Conference, boom, you can hedge out, hit the Bucks at minus whatever it'll be as their series price, or hit Bucks in the game. They have the defenders to handle Giannis. They have a coach who's a mad genius on defense and has put together just wild game plans. They have championship experience. They have shoot. They just have. When you have a team and a culture like that, I think you're just going to be in any game, and I think the Bucks in any series, and I think the Bucks are the favorite, but I'm not surprised I would not be surprised. In fact, I expect the Bucks at a certain point to be in a high leverage game 6 or 7. And I don't think a lot in the Eastern Conference playoffs, not in the finals. Whether that's the Raptors, Sixers, or Celtics, I think it comes into play. Also, I think something to mention, people are going to be like, hey, why are you not talking about the Celtics? I get it. I love the Celtics. They've got 6 scoring threats. They have the most fun. They're probably, outside of the Pelicans, the most fun team for me to watch. My problem is there's a chance they match up with the Celtics in the first round. Or, can't match up with the Celtics. There's a chance they match up with the Sixers in the first round. The Sixers have owned them. They have nothing for Giannis. And then if the Celtics somehow find their way into I forget how the seeding works down, but I just don't think they have the ammunition to guard Giannis, too. I've seen Giannis in Boston, in Milwaukee, anywhere, carve up that team. So I think the Celtics actually head-to-head match up well with the Raptors and would probably be the favorite against the Raptors. But everyone knows the big dog is the Bucks, and the Raptors match up a lot better with the Bucks, in my opinion. And so, and I really don't see the Celtics having a chance against the Bucks in a 7-game series. Honestly, at this point, could be wrong, but I mean, you just have to have someone other than Tice and Cantor and Bob Williams and Grant Williams to put on Giannis. Like he's gonna eat that. So that is why I'm not super high on the Celtics in terms of hitting them in futures. I think they're a great team, and if they're in a matchup against the Raptors, I would probably pick the Celtics, but it's looking like they should avoid each other. Okay, lastly, and in my mind, probably most interestingly, is the Philadelphia 76ers. Plus 750 to win the Eastern Conference, plus 2,000 to win the title. I really think both of those have legit shots. I would say they're right around the same probability as the Raptors. I'd say I'd give the Raptors probably a slightly higher probability because they're going to avoid the Bucks till the Eastern Conference Finals, whereas the Sixers most likely run into them early. Okay, Sixers had a terrible year, right? I'll just recap it. Had a terrible year. Were great at the crib. I think they lost 2 games the whole year at the crib, off on the road. Ben Simmons injuries. Joel was injured. Horford, the spacing did not work. In fact, minutes this year with Simmons, Horford, and Embiid. They were a -9 in those minutes. That's not good at all. Another crazy stat for you. Joel. In minutes where Joel is on the floor, Sixers lead the league in free throw attempts. In minutes where he's off the floor, the Sixers are dead last. Okay, what does this all mean? Why do I think the Sixers have a shot? They were bad all year. They couldn't play on the road. Every game is essentially a home game. Yeah, Bucks are the favorite, but the Sixers have really, I'm talking about checking boxes. The Sixers check really a lot of boxes in my mind that you need to potentially win a title. Okay, you look firsthand off the bat. Personnel-wise, they have the best guys to go against the Bucks. They have one Joel Embiid, when he is engaged and in shape, and Brett Brown has said he's in great shape. The things he can do on the defensive end, it's almost Gobert level paint protection, and he's just inconsistent. He's not always in shape like Gobert is. But I'd hope he is. Brett Brown just says he is. He can change the game in the paint, and he can anchor that paint against someone like Giannis who gets in there. And he did in that home game against the Bucks, in which they ran them. Okay, but let's just go down the line with the defensive guys they have. They have Matisse Thybulle, who straight out as a rookie. We talked about rookies generally aren't very impactful in their rookie year. I mean, they're just adjusting the league. They're babies. He, as a rookie, is already essentially an elite perimeter defender. So long as like a 7'2" wingspan and a 6'7" height. It's ridiculous. He's so active in the passing lanes. That's definitely a threat to have. And I feel comfortable calling him an elite defender. Ben Simmons is an elite defender. You don't really need me to talk about that. He's going to be playing the 4, so I think he's going to provide a little bit more secondary rim protection. I think allows him to get a little bit more active, as usually he's more of an on-ball defender, and so he can, play thief and just wreak havoc in the passing lanes. Jason Richardson is so underrated. This is a guy that was playing 37, 38 minutes a game in the playoffs for Coach Spo, who is a defensive-minded, hard-nosed coach. He just gets it. He really, really just gets it and understands how to play team defense. You're never going to find him out of position. He's a very solid one-on-one defender. And then lastly, you have Al Horford, who I think that's going to be the key, is figuring out, okay, minutes where Simmons, Horford, and Embiid share the floor, -9. Let's find ways to create lineups where Horford can thrive. Maybe we play Horford off the bench and bring him in as a 5 for Embiid, and then now there's more room. Now Horford can play as more natural. I don't know. But that is not good enough, and I think Simmons moving to the 4 will help. But, I mean, if Simmons is the 4, then Horford is coming off the bench. So we'll see. I don't know how that plays out. But, again, you have a team that, let me go through it in totality, a team that has 5 elite defenders. A team that has been there. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals, or Eastern Conference semis in a Game 7. And as soon as Brett Brown started having Jimmy Butler initiate the offense, the Sixers were the better team. And if Kawhi doesn't hit that, I think the Sixers win that game. And that was honestly still at that time an overweight Embiid, slightly overweight. Obviously, you lose Jimmy and JJ, but you've got a better version of Embiid, supposedly the best version of Embiid. You have that thing. I mean, Embiid was crying, so you have, you see a lot of guys that get to the mountain. It's tough to keep your foot on the gas pedal. There should be none of that with the Sixers. And I think besides all that, I'm very, very certain that in the playoffs, this game is going to slow down. It already slows down in the playoffs, but I think even more so, this style is more conducive to isolation. And when teams are going to really, because the easiest way to score is in transition. So when you have elite players like LeBron, Giannis, Harden, Russ, if you get out in a transition, chances are they're going to score or create opportunities to score that are better than in the half court. So teams are going to grind it down, and the Sixers have the best guy to grind it down with, and that's Joel Embiid. I mean, he's an absolute load. You don't really need me to explain that, but if he's the healthiest version of himself, that is so valuable to when the game slows down. Boom, throw it into Joel, a little shimmy, up fake, draws fouls, get to the line. He's got an unlimited bag down there, and I think that is just huge because the game will slow down. So you take the you got a half-court presence for when the game slows down, a guy who can get to the line, a team that's hungry, lost last year, a team that's been written off. Their best 2 players are healthy, and Joel is now in the best shape of his life. You can say that about a lot of teams, so maybe we don't give them that. And then they have 5 elite defenders, and a multitude of guys that you can throw at Giannis. So for me, you're going to give him plus 750, plus 2,000. I think they finally had some time out of the spotlight and to kind of regroup. And I haven't even mentioned Tobias. This is another shot for him. He's got to continue to get more and more comfortable. He's going to progress. He's not at the level anymore on defense where it's like, oh, you can just go at him. Burks and Robinson were solid adds. Furkan's a good shoot. Like, they have pieces. They have the shooting, too. They probably could use another ball handler. How well Shake plays is going to be a huge determining factor. But, with that being said, plus 750 for a team that has really every tool they need to win a title and the conference. It's just about putting it together. I think I'm going to take that every time. Quick thing to note. The Sixers are 6th in the East, which would currently match them up with the Celtics. They do have a cupcake schedule, though. So, in all likelihood, they move up. Indiana owns the tiebreaker right now, but they play Indiana the first night. I have actually, little tidbit, I hit Sixers -3 early on. Then, obviously, Sabonis goes out, and now it's up to -6. But the Sixers should have every chance to move up to 5, which I think is what they would prefer. Despite them still now, if they move up to 5, I think they have to play Bucks in the second round, but I think they'd rather move up to 5, play the Heat or Pacers, than stay 6 and have to play the Celtics in the first round. Guys, I think that about covers it. To recap, this is the year to hit dogs for many reasons that I stated. Blazers. It's a little scary watching Dame hoop out there and a healthy, strong-looking Nurk. But with the schedule and just the horrific defense, I'm backing under 3.5 wins at -105. I think the Grizzlies are worth the shot to make the playoffs at -115. They should, in all likelihood, just need to win 1 game in 2, which I think is a very doable task, although they're not looking great right now. Haven't officially hit that, but like it. I like the Rockets plus 650 to win the West. It's a very tournament. I've talked about it a million times. That team is as streaky as it gets. So in this type of setting, I really like that. Clippers are my favorite to win it all. They are my pick. Check every box. This is a business trip for them. Doc's been there. Doc wants this. Their best two players are healthy. They can win in so many different ways. So I just think you're like it. Meanwhile, the Lakers and Bucks, they do have weaknesses. I'm not saying the Clippers don't, but I believe the Lakers and Bucks are more glaring. Then you move to the East, which, again, Bucks should be the favorite, but I think it's going to be a little bit. I think the gap between the two, or I think the gap between the field and the Bucks is a little bit closer in the East than people think. I think the Raptors and Sixers are both well equipped with the pieces they need the necessary really tools to beat Milwaukee, and we'll see if it happens. But I think it's more likely than not that the Bucks find themselves in a high leverage game 6 or 7. Anyways, I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all for tuning into the first vid. Hope you were able to take something from this. Let me know in the comments what your favorite preseason bet is. I hope you're super, super excited, or as excited as I am for the NBA to come back. I hope everyone is safe. Please subscribe when you get the chance and like the video. Thank you all. Again, let me know your favorite preseason bet, and we will be back, I believe, Wednesday for the preview video of opening night on Thursday. Thanks, guys.